So the Seattle Kraken have amassed a boatload of draft picks in the next 3 years. Ron Francis and co. were hard at work finding those draft picks, and we're going to answer the question, do these draft picks solve the Seattle Kraken's problem? We know what the pathway is. They're going to build through the draft now. They've clearly signaled it by amassing a boatload of draft picks. But what does it really mean to build through the draft? How long is it going to take for this Seattle Kraken rebuild to occur? Are they going to draft with all their picks, or are they going to trade some picks? And what are the Seattle Kraken going to do to repair this team going forward? Don't forget, we made a video about this previously that I'll link at the end of the video called What Went Wrong with the Seattle Kraken. It was relatively popular for this channel. And the takeaway of that video was Ron Francis didn't do a good enough job in the expansion draft at amassing picks. And there were two different pathways that we talked about. And I think we put the subject to rest, but there were still comments about it. The fact of the matter is they said, hey, GMs got smarter. They didn't give the Kraken what Vegas got. And I said, that's not the case. Ron Francis tried to dictate the market by demanding first round picks and telling teams what they would give, as opposed to letting the market come to him and allow general managers to set the price for the market like Kelly McCrimmon did for the Golden Knights. Now, the Golden Knights had an advantage of going first, yes, but Ron Francis and co. absolutely refused to make a deal, drafted a bunch of players that were just, younger and that you could see what the path they were taking, and it just didn't work out. So at the end of the day, I said, hey, McCrimmon schooled Francis, but does picking up this massive amount of draft picks, 25 in the next 2 years, and I think 34 in the next 3, does having this many draft picks course correct the problem that Francis had? And the short answer is no. This is just step 1, and we're going to talk about the rest of the steps right now. So if you're a Kraken fan, let's head over to hockey school. Let's talk about GM 101 and what can be done with these picks, because when is your team going to rebound? When are they going to rebuild? When can you expect fruits of the labor to come through from these picks? And if you're new to Hot Garbage Sports, this channel is also sponsored by BetUS. You want to talk about making a good pick? Head over to betus.com if you're Canadian or American and make your pick for the Stanley Cup winner or your pick on daily hockey or any sport in their sportbook odds. You get a 125% deposit bonus for listening to Hot Garbage Sports. So if you're Canadian or American and gambling is legal in your state or province, head over to there, use code HDS or the link below, and go ahead and get started betting on sports, but keep it recreational. Make sure you're over the age of majority in your state or province. So we're only going to talk about 2022 and 2023, Kraken fans. We're going to leave 2024 alone because that actually starts getting too far out. The pontificating about 2024 becomes extraordinarily difficult. So let's go ahead and focus in on the 25 draft picks in the next 2 years, including this year and next year, and where that leaves the Kraken. We're going to take you to school with what the percentages draft picks actually hit. What should Ron Francis be looking for with these draft picks? What he may or may not do with these draft picks, and how long this rebuild is going to take. And yes, I just said rebuild. I said it in the last video. I'm not backing down from it. This isn't an expansion team. This is now in rebuild mode. And this rebuild mode came because this is what the general manager decided to do. Ron Francis was a very savvy general manager down in Carolina. I didn't think he had the best year here coming up to Seattle. I was very surprised. I expected big things out of Ron Francis, but it seems like he's picked up his game and he's course corrected his problems. So sometimes it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. So what he's done at this trade deadline, I'd absolutely give an A+ to him for. This is great, but he actually has to convert these into usable NHL pieces, and that becomes the difficult matter, because at the end of the day, draft picks are just lottery tickets. That's very simple. They are lottery tickets. And you have right now, by my count, 3 first-round draft picks. Those are gold. We'll talk about them in a minute. 7 second-round draft picks, 3 third-round draft picks, 5 fourth-round picks, and then the rest are picks 5, 6, and 7, which we'll get into. They're just not that hot of a pick. So that's what Francis is dealing with, and it's great to have that ammo. But you can do 2 things with these ammo, Kraken fans. You can make a pick, which, we all know a pick can turn into anything. A first round pick can turn into gold. Most of the time they do. A second round pick can turn into a guy like Nikita Kucherov or Sebastian Aho. A third round pick can turn into a guy like Braden Point. So everybody wants to point at these amazing, point with point, just caught myself. Everybody wants these picks to turn into these amazing late round prospects. Hey, Johnny Gaudreau in the 4th round. But it's very unlikely that that ends up happening. And we've got to take a look at what each round means when it comes to a return or a chance of a return for an NHL team. So first, I'm going to go ahead and throw it up on the big board here. Rounds 1 through 7, the successful amount of players per draft based on the draft round percentage that they hit. Now, whatever website you go to or research you do, everybody is a different category, but this has been well researched. Some people say 100 games in the NHL means you're not a bust. If you go over to quanthockey.com, which we will in a bit, they say any NHL game is considered a hit in a draft. I personally subscribe to the story of 200 NHL games. If you make a draft pick and they contribute to your roster for 2.5 years, that's not a bad draft pick at the end of the day. I mean, you would like more games than that. There's 3 years on an entry level contract. So, I mean, we're not asking for much with 200 NHL games, but to me, you're really not an impactful draft piece unless you're able to contribute 200 NHL games or more to a team. So when we take a look at the chart that I have up here, what I am saying is in the first round, 75% of the players in the first round are going to contribute 200 games or better to the NHL. And that means 24 players in the first round, in my opinion, will not be a bust. That's the statistical average over the last 20 years. Now, if you go into the second round, it falls off a bit of a cliff. And this is what we have to pay attention to. Rounds 2 through round 7 are not gold. Round 1 is gold. Top 5 pick, absolute diamonds, found money. Top 5 picks are near 100% hit rate. We can all point to Nail Yakupov, but it is so damn rare that Michael Delcol and Nail Yakupov show up in the top 5 that it actually ends up still rounding up to 100%. So even though it's not a true 100%, the roundup does end up getting us there. And no, we're not rounding up 95 to 100. We're talking like 99.6%. So we can round up, call it 100%. The second round, 35% of players play 200 NHL games or more. And we just said you got 7 of those picks. So, okay. That means 11 players in the second round are going to play meaningful NHL minutes. Think of a guy on the Winnipeg Jets team I got back there, Jansen Harkins, picked in the second round. He hasn't excelled off the fourth line yet. He's a productive player for the Jets, but this isn't an impact player. This is a depth player. There's a very big difference. And most of the guys in round 2 to round 7 and even late round 1, they end up as depth pieces, middle 6, bottom 6, or bottom pairing defensemen. That's just the commonality of what comes in these rounds. The top NHL players are usually picked with a top 5, top 15 pick, sometimes top 20, but we can call it the top 15 players in the draft. Those are your top 6. Those are your top 2 pairing guys. Those are not your starting goaltenders. We'll get to those in a minute. Round 3 is 27%. So it goes down. There's 9 players that are affected there. Round 4 is 7 players or 22%. So you can see a round 3 or a round 4 pick, it's about the same. Teams are just average. They're not very good at picking in those rounds. And then rounds 5, 6, and 7, look, 15% or 10%, 5 players or 3 players, year in and year out. These are going to change a little bit here and there. So you could basically count these as all the same. And don't talk to me about 5% being different from 15 for 10. I'm the math guy here. So when you take a look at this chart, it's very clear as to what is valuable and what's going to produce NHL talent. Now let's pull up another chart. And what this chart pulls up here is how many picks you have in each round. And when you're adding up percentages, you go ahead and you add them together. And what you'll see in this chart is round 1 through 7, how many total picks you have in the next 2 years. 3, 7, 3, 5, 2, 3, 2. That's how many picks you have in each round, corresponding to the round on the left. The percentage of hitting, we have round 1 at 270%. Why? Because we go back to that other graph where we said it's 75% likely to hit in round 1. We times that by 3. You just add up 3 things of 75%. What does that mean? That means you're likely to amass 2.7 NHL players. That means you're assured statistically, I mean, you could bust in all 3. It's not going to happen. But statistically, you are likely to produce 2 NHL players that play more than 200 games with your 3 first-round picks. You can't round this up to 3. Why? Because you're statistically assured 1, you're statistically assured 2, but 0.7, there's a random chance that you hit that 30% and it doesn't work out. So you got a 70% chance here that you're going to get 3 NHL players. So we go ahead and we can't say it's assured because it's not. It has to be over a whole number to be assured. So you could get 3, that's the range, 2 to 3, but you are assured 2. When you go ahead and take a look at the second round, you take that 35%, you add it up 7 times because you have 7 round picks and you have a 245% likelihood to draft an NHL player. What does that turn into? That turns into another 2 NHL players. And what did we say before? The first round is where you're going to find your top 6 and your top 4. So you're likely finding 2 depth pieces in the second round. Again, you could find Nikita Kucherov or Sebastian Aho, but the likelihood of this is you're going to get 2 out of all 7 picks. You're going to get 2 NHL depth pieces in the second round. We go forward, we do it with the third round because the third round only has 3 picks and the percentage of successfully hitting those picks is lower than the second. You're actually assured 0. They could all bust. Stats say all 3 of your third round picks are going to bust. Sorry, that's the way it goes. Is Francis better than others? We'll get into it. We'll get into the general manager making the choice versus the luck aspect in a minute. Then you go ahead, you look at round 4, round 5, round 6, but because you have so many round 4 picks, that's the only other place you're assured to get another NHL player. So what does this mean? It means I have just walked you through the math of 25 draft picks. You're going to get 5 players. You get 5 players. We know a roster is greater than 20. So when you're taking a look at these 5 players, it's also safe to say that there's a good chance that your 4th round assured player could be a goalie, because we know goalies take 3 to 4 years to draft. And we also know this, Kraken fans, that goalies are drafted in rounds 3 to 5. That's where you want to draft goalies. Why? They're the most important position in hockey, but they are so hard to evaluate. They take so long to pay you back because very few goalies are Carey Price and end up starting at 18, 19 years old and carry on in their NHL career. Most of the time they take till they're 23, 24 before they show up to their NHL and start playing meaningful minutes. It can take 3 to 6 years to develop a goaltender. So that's why you use rounds 3 to 5. You use a lot of picks and you just go hunting goalies until you finally get one. Okay, so what does that mean then about these 5 players contributing to the NHL team? Well, when we go ahead and pull up this chart, we can see out of these 5 players, you can get 2 productive players because likely the 2 first-round picks are going to be productive, and we know one of those is going to be a top 5 pick, so that's going to be a home run. We just said they were gold. You're going to get 2 NHL players, and we're just going to call them NHL players. They could be bottom 6, they could be top 6. They're likely to be bottom 6. Let's just call them contributors, and then you're going to get 1 bottom NHL player, somebody that's just real depth, that kind of thing. It's likely coming out of the 4th round, or maybe a goalie. If we go ahead and take a look at all the picks together, now what we want to do with this graph is discuss how long is it going to take them to make the NHL. This is really key. Your 3 first-round picks, which are the top areas of this graph, you'll see that in 2022, because you have a top 5 pick, there is a there is a 100% chance they're going to play in the NHL. It's like Matty Beniers. He's going to be there. He's going to be productive for you. That person makes the NHL, and the likelihood of them playing is only going to be 1 year. It'll be like Beniers. Maybe they go back to college or the CHL for 1 year, and then they're going to hit the NHL. There have been a couple guys. Quentin Byfield for the LA Kings was another guy that took a year before he entered the NHL. But there's also a chance it could be 0 years. It's actually a very good chance it's going to be 0 years. It's a better chance that he stays with the Kraken than he goes back somewhere else. But let's call it 1 year. You're going to likely have a top 10 pick in 2023. I think that's important to note. So that top 10 pick has got a 95% chance of playing in the NHL and being a successful impact player. That person is going to go ahead and take 1 year. So your 2 first-round picks in 2022 and 2023, they're going to be both playing for your team by 2025. Follow me? Okay, it's 2022, so they're going to be on your team at 2025, and we're just talking about the first round picks. So now you're starting to see where the old fishing line is sending you out, this 2 or 3 year rebuild. Maybe not, but stay tuned. I'm going to talk about how we can shorten this up, I promise. Okay, then when you keep going down this graph, what you can see is the second round picks, we've assigned a 35% success rate to the NHL, and it's likely 4 years, team. 4 years for second round pick to come through. Yes, if you catch the home runs of Kucherov, they'll be in sooner, but most second round picks, again, Jansen Harkins, my favorite team, the Jets, took them 4 years to even crack the Jets as an NHL regular. They usually finish out college or their CHL year in the WHL. You're very familiar with that, with Portland and Seattle, both right around there, Tri-Cities. They likely play that out till they're 20, which is 2 years past the draft date, and then they likely play in the AHL for another 2 years. That's why it's 4 years. So now you're looking at 2027 to 2028 for your second round picks to go ahead and start producing fruit. That's pretty mind-blowing. Then you go ahead and you look at your third round picks, and third and fourth round picks, you really have the same 4 to 5 year range for these players to start kicking in at this point. Somebody that's drafted this late usually ends up through rookie camp. Maybe they make the East Coast League. Maybe they make the AHL. Yep, there can always be surprises in those rounds, like Andre Palat, 6th round pick, that can end up just making a huge impact to your NHL team. But the likelihood is that if those players are going to play for you and hit, they are going to wait till they're 23 to 25 years old to really crack your roster. And now we're putting ourselves to 2029 before all these picks come to fruition. Francis isn't going to make all these picks. Let's be honest. Why would he make all these picks? When you go ahead and look through that math, the whole reason I walked you through that isn't to be like, you're going to make all these picks and it's going to take forever. It's because these picks are worth something. We just saw some amazing things happen. Mason Appleton, who is an NHL regular that you're very familiar with, only cost a 4th round pick. The Winnipeg Jets got a 3rd, possibly up to 2nd line, depending on how the Jets lineup goes, player, worst case scenario, a 4th line player, but a 200 plus game NHL productive known quantity was worth a 4th round pick. So you can find players like that you can bring back into your system to expedite this process, right? Now, once you've made a couple of those 1st round picks, maybe a few of those 2nd round picks, 2022, you're going to make more picks than trade. I promise you that. But by 2023, you may be looking to deal some of those picks for proven NHL quantities and go ahead and go, okay, so maybe we don't get 5 players from the draft. Maybe we only get 3 because we've traded a bunch of picks, but we're going to bring in consistent NHL players to build around our top tier talent that we just drafted in the 1st round. Matty Beniers in your next 3 1st round picks is going to be huge. And this year's draft is a very deep draft. So your top 5 pick this year, even if it's not number 1 and it's not Shane Wright, could actually end up being better than Beniers. And Beniers is a damn good player. So there's 2 really good pieces that are going to come your way that take some time to develop there. So if I'm Ron Francis, I'm going to start thinking about what am I going to do with these 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks. The final thing you should be left thinking of is, okay, so Francis is an NHL player. He's did really well, I thought, in Carolina, like really well as the GM over there. So he's more likely than not to go ahead and make a successful NHL pick, is he not? No. And let me show you why. When you go ahead to quanthockey.com and go to the NHL Draft tab at the top, you can see all the NHL drafts, and I suggest you come here, play it by yourself if you're really into drafting things. So we just showed that it takes 1 to 4 years for an NHL draft pick to really develop into a proven player. So let's go ahead and ignore the last 4 years because they're just not going to give us a good example for what we're looking for. Let's go ahead and jump into 2015 or 2014 because those years are pretty good years. That gives us 6 to 7 years to see how these drafts shake out. So I'm going to go ahead and click 2015. Then when you take a look at their top chart here, you're going to see, wow, 100% of players went to the NHL in round 1. Remember, I told you Quant Hockey counts it. You play 1 game, you're a hit. So these percentages, I don't like them. That's why I went ahead and made my own percentages because these are just not true. These are just players that played a game. We know this was the famous McDavid and Eichel draft. So this was a really deep draft. So when we take a look at that top 5 pick you have next year, you can see it here. I mean, look at Hanifin, Marner, Strome, Eichel, and McDavid. When you go ahead and look at the point totals, you're getting a pretty sure thing here for a proven player. Hanifin, Marner, Eichel, and McDavid were solid picks. Obviously, Eichel, McDavid in different categories of their own, and Strome has started to finally come along. So those top 5 picks are absolute gold. When you move down into a top 10 pick, you can find a guy, Timo Meier, All-Star game, Zach Werenski, All-Star, Provorov, could have been an all-star, but Philly, Mikko Rantanen, obviously elite, one of the top 2 wingers in the NHL right now. So these are good. I mean, this was a good draft, but these are good picks. These are solid picks you want. You move into pick 11 down to 15. Now you can start see it. Look, it's the classic Boston Bruins bust, the big 3 here, right? Pretty funny stuff. They miss all 3 picks, but I mean, even DeBrusk works out. But when you go past those guys, you see Barzal, Connor Chabot, elite. Really, really nice. Evgeny Svechnikov, huge bust, playing for the Jets right now. I mean, he's fine, but this is not where you want pick 19 in the 1st round. Joel Eriksson-Ek, Colin White, you just keep going down, and you see the lower you go, the more likely it is the player's going to bust. This is why we say pick 20 to pick 30, and now it's pick 32. Look at all these guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players that easily should have played regular NHL minutes. They didn't. They're bust. Jacob Larson, arguably, also a bust even at 165 games. That's not what you want to be looking at, not in my opinion anyway. Anthony Beauvillier is the only real productive player that you're looking at down here, while Travis Konecny is too. So, I mean, it's likelihood there. I mean, heavy top weighted. So let's go down into round 2. This is where you start seeing the graveyard. This is why it's a 35% chance to hit. Look at all these blank spots. These are players that never even got to play an NHL game. So 2nd round pick, you're a stud in junior, you're a stud there. You don't end up making it to a single game in the NHL. Then you look, even the great Tampa Bay Lightning, Michael Stephenson, like nothing, bust. AJ Greer, bust. Nicolas Malek, bust. I mean, they're playing, if they're bolded, they're playing in the NHL right now, but kind of a bust. Mackenzie Blackwood, here we start our run on goalies. Not quite a bust, not yet. Eric Cernak, productive player, but when you look at, there's the Sebastian Aho pick, there's the Brandon Carlo pick. And that's what I'm saying. When you look at this round, it's pretty clear to me. Like, they're the oddballs. They're the exceptions to the rule. And when you say, hey, Francis is good enough to nail a guy like Aho, I argue not, because Aho is better than most of those first round picks. So what that tells me is that 75% of the general managers in the NHL were not good enough to realize that Sebastian Aho is one of the most elite two-way talents in the NHL, because they all passed on him in the first round. I would be taking Aho number three after Eichel and McDavid. And there's an argument that Aho should go above Eichel. That's how damn good he is. So everybody missed him. So is Francis that good to go, I know everybody's going to miss this guy and I'm going to snake him in the second round? No, he's not. No one would risk an elite NHL talent like Aho falling through. It doesn't work that way, team. Everybody missed him. So what that tells me is that the Carolina Hurricanes, yes, they picked him, but they got lucky. Okay, back to our little exercise here. Eric Cernak, same thing. Rupe Hintz. Who the frick is Rupe Hintz? He's just been a guy who's been a thorn in my side as a Jets fan now, who came out of nowhere. That it frustrates me that Kevin Cheveldayoff couldn't find a guy like this because he's playing on the first line in Dallas, and him and Jason Robertson are going to take us out of the playoffs because they found gold in the second round. You win Stanley Cups by finding gold in the second round. So let's keep going. Vince Dunn, somebody you'll be very familiar with, ends up in there. Now we go into round 3 and the graveyard gets even worse. You can see that. That is scary. Tons of players not playing. Who's our impact players? Anthony Cirelli. Of course, he came from Tampa Bay. Stevie Y is the one exception to the rule that I said about this. That guy knows how to draft. So Anthony Cirelli, productive player. Everybody else, let's call him a bust. Pretty simple. Going to round 4, there's William Borgen. There's another player you'll be familiar with via that draft. Nicholas Waugh, the Vegas Golden Knights expansion player that ended up moving over there. Austin Wagner. There's nobody in here that you're going like, man, this is who I'm going to build a team around. Nobody. You go down to round 5, Connor Garland. Yeah, that's a pretty good player. And Troy Terry. Troy Terry's a pretty good player as well, too, when we're taking a look through there. Now we're down to round 6, and Mangiapane is not a bad pick. Mason Appleton, damn good pick for round 6, I would say. And then round 7, same idea, but there's a couple guys here who snuck through. All right, so it's only one draft. Let's go ahead and look at 2014 quick. Same idea. Aaron Ekblad, obviously a stud. Took him a while to get going. Sam Reinhart, Draisaitl. Bennett has finally come around. It was looking like he was a bust, and Dal Coll is one of those rare top 5 busts that we talked about. Hayden Fleury is also there as well as a bust, in my opinion anyway, for how high he was picked. But then you take a look and you got Nylander, Ehlers, Ritchie, bust in my opinion. Fiala, good player. Perlini. And as you kind of keep going down, you see Dylan Larkin sneaks in. But as we go lower again, you see the same patterns emerge. Now you start getting some blanks. You start getting some misses. You go to the second round, same idea. Marcus Peterson, absolute home run. Barbashev, home run. Brendan Lemieux, not really. Depth player. Thatcher Demko, absolute home run. So as you kind of scroll down, you got Braden Montator, Ryan Donato, Christian Dvorak. So there you go. We look at round 3. Hey, we got Fogle. Okay, he's fine. Fogle. Braden Point, absolute home run. Not like when you think about Braden Point or anyone in the third round, that means GMs pass on him twice. Every GM in the league passed on him twice. So it's nothing but luck at this point that the Tampa Bay Lightning end up sniping a guy like that. But the fact that the Tampa Bay Lightning under Stevie Y did it consistently, they have something like 7 or 8 players drafted between round 2 and round 7 on their Stanley Cup winning championship teams. That at that point is no longer an accident, but Ron Francis doesn't have that track record. Only Stevie Y does. And then the final point to take home here is I've said your rebuild, when people are saying 3 to 4 years, it could be 5 to 6. Well, here, let's take a look at 2019. This is 2 years into the NHL draft. When you take a look at the first round, look who's playing. The top 3 picks are playing. Then after that, it falls off. They're not in there yet. Mort Seider, okay, yeah, he's in there now. Took a little bit of a time. Hey, Stevie Y pick again. What can you say? Guy's a beast. As you keep going down, you see, yes, there's some very good players here, but it takes a little while to get going. I would argue that Trevor Zegras is just getting started this year, 2 years later. As you scroll to the bottom, there's more players in the previous draft that haven't even played a game yet. They're not busts yet. They got some time. The second round's an absolute graveyard of players that haven't played yet. The third round gets even worse. The fourth round gets scarier. And then, there's nobody playing. So to me, 2017 is that sweet spot. That's 5 years away. And as we kind of scroll through the Nico Hischier, Nolan Patrick draft, turns out it was Cale Makar. That was the player everybody should have been picking. Miro Heiskanen could have absolutely gone number 2 here. But digress. digressing as we scroll through, you can see it again, same idea. So the second round starts contributing 4 years later. 4 years later, the second round's kicking in. So now all of a sudden, it's not just a hat rack, and my math is making a little more sense there, Kraken fans. So it's all going to be about the takeaway about what he does with these picks. And there may be more value in trading away these picks for proven players than making the pick. That's the life lesson I want to leave you here with. So making 34 picks in the next 3 years sounds attractive, but you likely want to make 20 to 25 picks. 10 of those picks can definitely be dealt for more proven NHL players because you got a long way to go in terms of looking at that roster before you build a competing roster. You need to have, let's call it 5 to 10 guys in your AHL system that can play NHL minutes when your NHL regulars get hurt. That is what we call depth. 5 to 10 AHL players that are young and solid and can play NHL minutes and maybe even explode onto the scene and keep their position with the NHL team because they're better than the veteran, in order to start competing and say, my rebuild is done and my cupboards are full. So that means you need to have 22 NHL regulars plus 10. You need to have 35 NHL ready guys that you are confident in that can play NHL minutes before your team rebuild is fully redone. It's going to take 4 to 5 years. That's my prediction. Let me know if I got it right down below.